never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. All right. You can go ahead and pull up the first slide there. There we go. I have 3 stories to tell you today. 3 stories. And all of them are stories about journeys. You got journeys in mind? Like, anybody here been to Big Bend? You ever been to Big Bend? If you haven't been, it's one of the greatest of our national parks. And I love it. Been there a number of times. And my first story, in fact, all these stories are not just about journeys, but they're about what happens when the journey we're on turns hard and we struggle and we wonder if we're supposed to be on this journey. So, my first story is Big Bend. Big Bend is a desert. And I was there. Did you do that or did I do that? All right, let me do them. I'm going to try them. Big Bend was a desert. I was there 3 years ago this month. Now, this is August. What do you think a desert in Texas is like in August? Dry. Not just dry. Hot. Hot. I got the great idea to hike to, and there's a lot of cool places to hike in Big Bend, but I got the great idea. I was going to hike to see something I'd never seen before. It's a thing called Balanced Rock. It's supposed to be very beautiful. It's a short hike, 2.5 miles there and back. And I'm thinking, no big deal. Well, we got off to a late start, not good in August. In fact, there were warnings, don't hike after 10 a.m. Probably took off about noon. And not good already. The road to get to the trail, and this trail is called Grapevine Hills, which I saw no grapes and very few hills. You get to this trailhead here, and to get there you have to drive on a 6.5 mile road, which is the worst road I have literally ever driven on. They say no cars, you have to have a high clearance vehicle. It was 6.5 miles driving at 2 miles an hour. It took probably an hour and a half just to get to the trailhead. 114 degrees that day. This is not one of my better ideas, not one of my better journeys. There was a young couple, much younger than me, coming out. We asked them, hey, how was the hike? They're drenched in sweat. They went, it was good. With a bottle of water and a bottle of Gatorade, we decided, let's do it. And we took off. And this is what we saw. There is no shade on this trail. It was 114 degrees. It's a gully wash most of the way. I'm in sandals with gravel getting all under my feet. And it's only 1.1 miles to the Balanced Rock. But about halfway there, I stopped and I looked around and I said, what am I doing here? Have you ever been at a place in your life where you stop and you look around and you say, what am I doing here?
Who wants to see a Balanced Rock?
It's too hard. It's too, should I go back? Can I go back? Okay, that's story 1. I'll finish that later. Story 2 is our Old Testament lesson today. It's one of the greatest stories of humankind. It's the story of the Exodus. And talk about people complaining and having a hard time. So the Israelites, 400 years, were slaves in Egypt. complaining the whole time. Their numbers increase. They're in the hundreds of thousands, maybe the millions. And Pharaoh goes, hey, these Israelite people are getting too big. I'm gonna put the squeeze on them, make sure they know who's the boss. So now their life gets harder. 400 years of slavery, and then your life gets harder. More complaining. God sends Moses. Moses, I want you to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses goes, I can't talk. What are you talking about? More complaining. So God sends Aaron to go with him. Then you have the plagues. You know those plagues hit everybody, all except the last one. So now all the people there are going through the locust and the water turned to blood and having a difficult time. Finally, Pharaoh lets them go. And as they're leaving, Pharaoh changes his mind, gets his army together, and is chasing them down. And the people are like, great, 400 years of slavery, and now we're about to be killed by Pharaoh's army before we even get started. And of course, the Red Sea parts, collapses on the Egyptians. And they're wandering. They're on the way to the promised land. Sounds good, right? Don't you want to be on a journey that's on the way to the promised land? Sounds like a great journey. Until there's nothing to eat and nothing to drink. And they're complaining again. Now, where is God when we get to a place in our lives where the journey is too hard and the struggle is too great, and we cry out, God, where are you? Why am I here? And do you know what God's answer is? It's an interesting answer. This is Exodus 16:11. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, I have heard the complaining of my people. You know what God's answer is when the journey gets too hard? I hear you. I'm listening. Now, I want to suggest to you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my third story, which is a trip to Africa I got to take. But listening has less to do with our ears and more to do with our hearts. Listening is an attitude of the heart. It's a genuine desire to be with another that attracts and heals the other person. In fact, deep listening can actually help relieve the suffering of another person. And compassionate compassionate listening has one purpose, and it's the listening that God gives us. And it's to help someone empty their heart. To be listened to is to be able to bare your heart to God and have God hear you. Wow, what a gift. And that's the gift that God gives the Israelites. I hear you. I hear you. You're in my heart. That's the second story. I'll tell you a third story about some street kids in Africa. And I brought, this is kind of an interesting story. So let me get it started here. There's Africa. I've got a friend who's going to help me with this story because she's been there too. This is Patty Wallace. She's an old childhood friend of mine. Patty and I grew up together in the same neighborhood, a few houses down. Patty's been a teacher around the world and has, huh? What? Yeah, we're not telling stories about us. This is a story about a trip to Africa. But there's Kenya. You see Kenya there with the arrow? And there it is. And there, that little dot there is a little town called Bungoma, Africa. It's out in western Kenya. And it's surrounded, pretty poor town, surrounded by poor rural villages. And I want to talk about some people who listen, deep listen, compassionate listening, okay? And when we listen to each other and when God listens to us, amazing things happen. Our hearts are freed, and we end up giving of ourselves. So here, these are some people who listened to street kids in Bungoma, Africa, other side of the world, and things started to happen. So this is David and Linda Fisher. They took a trip with a friend of theirs to Bungoma and saw these kids living on the street. And they talked to these kids, and they listened to them, and they were moved with compassion. And they ran into these two guys. These are brothers. That's George and David Wasanga. And George and David grew up on the streets, kind of the slums, not really the streets, but the slums of Bungoma, Africa, Kenya. And they had a rough life. And but they struggled through. They're faithful guys, and they ran into Linda and David, and then you guys know this guy, Chris Lake. He's a friend of mine. Chris Lake is pastor out at the Lutheran Church in Conroe. In fact, we have a history with Chris. These pictures here, these digital projectors, Chris helped put those in here. Okay, he's kind of a technology guru guy. I hired Chris as a 16-year-old to work at Camp Chrysalis when I was camp director there. So he's a good friend of mine. Doggone it, that boy drugged me. The Fishers went to his church. So all of a sudden, you've got street kids in Africa. You've got David and George who live there, who know these kids. You've got the Fishers who meet them. They're members of Chris's church. Chris is now involved. And guess what Chris drags me into? Woohoo, let's go to Africa. So here we are, taking off. That's me, Chris, Wayne, and Rich. And we took off in March and went to visit these kids. This is what we saw. All right, Patty, you can join in anytime you want. So we're driving into Bungoma, and pretty much dirt roads. And these are some houses that the people live in. Okay? These are journeys, right, that these kids took. There's downtown Bungoma, where the kids live. Another picture of downtown. And while we're there, I stopped and I talked to this little boy. He's living at a truck stop in Bungoma, Africa, begging from the truck drivers there. That's his journey in life. Pretty rough one, right? We handed out some bread and some drinks. Here's a little boy who just got some. And the kids, when we drive by in a van, they come up to the van looking for some food for the day. And you see the little boy on the right there? He's got glue in a bottle, and he tapes it around his head to keep the pain away, the hunger and the hurt, and just the pain of living. So that's their journey. And when you hear their stories and when you listen to them, do you have anything to add to that? Seeing the boys on the street?
Yeah, it's very graphic.
Pretty hard journey.
Yeah, and then with the blue bottles, that's their sustenance in a way.
Yeah, wait.
Out in the world.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do with this kind of journey? Well, here's what the Fishers did. They bought some land outside of town. And they built a mud house, kind of a house made of mud bricks, and David and George's parents moved in, and 10 or 11 boys moved in. They started a little group home, and they got some animals, and they planted some crops. And this is about 8 years ago. For a couple years, they just had a bunch of kids living there, kind of working their way through. And then, after a couple years, they built a big group home. Woohoo, look at that. This is people listening to other people and what happens, okay? And they built this group home, and now the boys, this is the dining hall, so now they have food to eat, right? And you know what they eat? This is the backyard. I got to show you what they eat. Anybody know what that is? That's lunch, I'm telling you, that's lunch. And dinner most days. That's ugali. Ugali is maize ground up into flour, boiled, and then baked into this paste. And the kids eat that almost every day. And in fact, it's interesting because you know where corn comes from, right? It comes from the Americas. So corn was here, it got taken to Europe, and then the Portuguese took it to their colonies in Africa. And now it's a staple of Africa. The boys will grab a hunk of this and make a little scoop, and then whatever they're having with it, whether it's kale or little anchovies or whatever it is, and that will be a meal for them right there. They also have chapati, which is a corn tortilla. And it rivals any corn tortillas we have, I'm here to tell you, okay? So that's bean and tortillas. That's another meal that the kids have. Pretty spark meals though, right? Yeah. But here's what they got. They got a playground. They put in a basketball court. They have worship services. In fact, I just texted them this morning, and they had just gotten out of worship service this morning. They do right there at the group home. I love this picture. We take birthdays and birthday cakes for granted. A lot of these boys have never had a birthday cake or a birthday celebration. So on the month of their birthday, they get their own cake. How fun is that? For the first time in most of their lives, they get a birthday cake and someone to sing happy birthday to them. Isn't that cool? Of course, they share it with the other guys. There's up to 70, 80 boys that live here. And I just had to share this with you. So this is a delicacy. So sometimes at night, maybe once a week or so, termites will fly around the lights outside the group home. And the boys will go out with buckets and catch the termites and roast them and then eat them like M&Ms. This was a young man offering me some termites. Here, sir, and which is a big deal because that's a treat for them. I did not taste the termites. Now, Chris Lake, my pastor friend, has tasted it, and he says it tastes like chicken. But I don't believe him. I don't know about that. Did you try the termites? You didn't get any offered to you. All right. They also have a drop-in center, which is in town. So the group home's just outside of town, 70 to 80 boys. In town, they have a drop-in center that they operate. It's interesting. Where does a street kid go when they get sick or injured? Where do they go? So this is what the drop-in center does. It lets street kids who are sick or injured come and stay, get seen by a doctor, get medicine, get well. Pretty cool, huh? Now, we are educators. Stand up. We are educators. Here we go. Where have you taught before? Internationally.
I've taught in Central Asia and South America and Europe.
Europe, where in Europe?
Sweden.
Sweden. All right. So Europe, South America, and Central Asia. This is what the kids do. They copy out of books and they copy into other books and stuff. And I'm going to show you the school that the elementary school kids go to. But this is what I saw the kids doing at the group home. So they're sitting there with books, copying in books, copying some more stuff in books. But now I want to show you the school that they go to. And this is why I was in Africa, why we were in Africa, because we're educators. And now how we're trying to listen to what God's asking us to do and telling us to do. So there's the school. All right. You actually got to see it with kids and they danced for you and stuff. Yeah, school was out when I was there. Does that look familiar?
Yes.
That's the walkway outside the elementary classrooms. And I'll show you the classroom. Ready? This is an elementary classroom with 50 kids and one teacher.
Yeah, the ones we saw with all the kids in there, it was dirt floors and the benches and the tables. There weren't that many. That's a lot in there for this classroom, but they were upside down and the kids were sitting on the dirt floor.
Wow. And they're packed. They're just packed in there. That's the school we saw. The kids walk to this school about 3/4 of a mile, 15-minute walk every day, rain or shine. And this is the school they go to. Dirt floor, nothing on the walls. You see that blackboard in the back? This is what it is. It's just black paint on the wall. That's the blackboard. Wow. That's their journey. So even though the kids got off the street and into the group home, this is their school situation, okay? So the listening, the compassion continues, right? This is the playground. That's the playground at this school. 1,000 kids in the elementary school. That's their playground. You see those two poles? It has a little rope across. That's a soccer goal. There's the bathroom. They're outside. They're just latrines. Now, above the dining hall, there is this one empty room at the group home. And there's not a computer in sight, as you can imagine, at this school, right? Not a computer in sight. And these kids are behind. They're behind academically. They haven't been in school, but I want to put a computer lab here. How cool would that be? Let the kids catch up, do their homework. I'm going to grab a sheet of paper here. I think I can fit about 20 computers around there, let the kids have a study space. Right now they study in their rooms or in their little group areas. That's me trying to listen, okay? So, George and David were living in Bungoma. They listen to the street kids and try to help them. The Fishers go, and they listen, and now they're involved. Their pastor, Chris, gets involved, and now he's involved. I get involved. I invite Patty to come, and now she's involved, right? It's what happens when you're on a journey and you're stuck, and you need someone to hear your heart, to empty your heart, and to enter into your suffering and help you, right? So, I'm going to try to build a school for these guys. I got to tell you, so these are some of the kids. This is Abednego. You know the story, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego? Well, this is Abednego. That's his name. The funny thing is, the social worker at the drop-in center, his name's Meshach. I did not meet a Shadrach, but I'm looking for him, okay? But this is Abednego. This is Joel. They call him Choo-Choo. I don't know, maybe he runs around a lot, right? This is Adias. This little guy, he was pretty new there when I visited in March. His name's Hillary, like Clinton, Hillary. So, but that's his name, Hillary, right? And this is Joshua Barasa. Joshua just turned 20 in June. He's lived at this group home for 6 years. Okay? Just real quickly tell you his story. Because we all have these stories, right? Of how did we get to where we are. When Joshua was 2, his mom died. He does not know how. When he was 4, his father abandoned him. He moved in with a neighbor who took him in, but her husband didn't like Joshua and didn't want him. So Joshua was in and out of the streets for the next 5-6 years of his life. Finally, George and David picked him up, and he moved in. He was one of the kids who moved into the original house, the little mud house that they had, and he's lived for 6 years now at the King's Embrace, this group home, okay? The sweetest kid you'd ever want to meet. He takes care of the little boys. He reads them stories. He helps them with their homework. At night, he goes around and tucks them in, right? So here's a kid, just imagine that. 2 years old, you lose your mom. 4 years old, you're kicked out. You're living on the streets of a town in western Kenya. And look at him. Could not meet a happier kid. He wants to come study in the United States. I'm going to try to get him here. Okay? I'm going to try to get him here. And he wants to be a neurosurgeon. I was like, Joshua, let's just get to college first, okay? We'll go the neurosurgeon route down the way. But a super cool kid. All right? So, 5 little journeys right there. 5 little journeys. All of their journeys were on the streets of Bungoma at one time, looking, asking for God, where are you? And God says, I'm listening. I love you. And, you know, we look back on our lives, and it's the hard times and the struggles in our journeys that have made us who we are. And without them, we would not be who we are today. And if you find yourself pausing with your life, looking around, saying, what is going on? Why is this so hard? I want you to know that a compassionate and loving God hears you. And we can be that for each other. So, the Israelites made it to the promised land. These boys, these street boys, made it to a group home where they have food and shelter. And me, get back to my balanced rock story, that's where I made it. I almost died hiking to that rock. And I want to tell you, there was no shade along the way, but when I got to the rock, There's shade under the rock. And I sat there for a half hour, finished my water and my Gatorade, and said, I wonder how fast I can hike 1.1 miles back to my car. That's the journey. So, where is God when the journey gets hard and we struggle? God is listening with compassion. And here's the other thing. You can't go back. In fact, not only when you stop and look around and life is hard, not only can you not go back, your new life is going to cost you your old life. You got to give it up. And you have to let it go and move forward. So Jesus, in our gospel lesson today, Jesus sees the crowds. He feeds them. But he says, you know, don't just follow me because I give you bread. I'm the bread of life. So come, a good and compassionate God is listening. Empty your heart and let God enter into that space with you, and let us do that for one another. Amen. Sorry, I didn't let you talk much, did I? All right. We have a great song to sing, Goodness of God.